And I included the two different kind of styles that you'll notice um in some of the carvings, and if you do any research online, you'll come across the two different kind of styles where it's the roundness or the pointing.
Hmm.
The pointing part is more of the Elder Futhark style, but it was still kind of used in the Younger Futhark times as well. So it was because I mean, you get so used to carving or writing out something in a certain way that it just that's how
Mm.
it is, right?
It's like using capital letters or something.
Yeah. 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 So thirst basically is translated as giant. Um, but there's it kind of thirst was kind of used as the more not so good aspects of this rune to kind of bring through that energy of it, whereas Jotun and Rizi are more connected to giant than thirst. So like among the three words, thirst, Jotun, Rizi, thirst carries most of the negative connotations that's connected to this. So like the thirst was the most common word often referred to ogres or trolls or any creature of a destructive nature. And
Hmm.
Jotun Rizi being terms that represent the many races of the giants, because there's many of them. And this energy of this rune is very strong, and it carries a great ability to shift any situation with brute force. So, just like the Elder Futhark, meaning of it being able to be very direct, like just like coming right in right away, doing its job and then leaving, it still carries that kind of energy. This that almost like a hammer coming down. And that's why they would connect it. Another reason why they would connect it to Thor because of his hammer, Thor's hammer, and all that stuff. But Thirst now is not so much connected to Thor anymore, if that makes sense. It started to shift. And one of because they did this with a lot of the runes um by the Viking Age and the Younger Futhark, is once the Christian influence started to come in, they started to try to remove any connection to Norse mythology that they could from any of it. So then they started to remove the meanings of the gods from these runes, right? Anything that connected to it, Norse mythology. And then what they did is with this rune in particular, because Thor was such a people's god, you know, yes, there was Odin, there was certain factions that would worship Odin, but Thor was seen as the god that every human would pray to because he was part um not human in a way, but from earth because of his mother being um an earth goddess, right?
Hmm.
Lord, she was a Jotun, but she was connected to the earth deeply. And so everyone prayed and sacrificed to Thor, and it was such a strong connection that the Christian influence came along and really tried to break that connection.
Hmm.
So with this rune, what they ended up doing is just focusing on the negative aspects of it, trying to.
You
So
can
you'll
see how the Christian, though, with Jesus being kind of like Thor in that he's the son, but he's very connected because he came through an
Mhm.
earth mother.
Uh-huh.
See, they would have really,
Really tried to connect it,
we
right?
can't have this competition here.
Yeah,
Need to be talking about Jesus, not Thor.
yeah, yeah. Well, and what's interesting is that there is I can't remember that book I read. I'll have to look in my library that I have, but they were drawing a connection between Jesus and Odin. just through the sacrificial parts of their stories, right?
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing to look at because the next rune that we'll look at us is purely about Odin, and somehow that rune retained its connection to Odin, whereas Thurs, they were like, no, we don't want Thor involved anymore, but we're just gonna focus on the giants and the, what people are more afraid of.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
an interesting thing. But so you see how I have listed is that like their focus was more on the thorn, the pain, the suffering, the brute force, which I can see positive aspects in the brute force. Yes, it can be not so good, but I see how brute force can be helpful in some situations that
When you
require
need
it.
to be, yeah, really direct or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And for myself, I added in strength, protect, defend, and shield because for me that this is what the energy really carries for me of this rune. Um,
And see the shape of is more like a shield too. The
yeah,
the the more
yeah,
curved.
to be able to grip a hold of it and hold it as something that can, you know, deflect what's coming at us is
Mm.
what I've feel from this rune, and I've also used this rune as a way to surround myself in a form of protection.
Yeah.
Um, one thing about the brute force though, like we know that it can be very helpful and useful at times, but because of the brute force energy of the rune, it's important to understand that this rune is not that gentle, soft transition or shift that some may be hoping for. And so it's more of a type of energy that if you need it in this moment, you need it right now, it has to be right now, then this is a rune to work with. And but being very specific in our um intentions and purpose surrounding it, right? Protection, defense, definitely, because I feel like whatever's being projected towards you, this rune can help with either stopping it or pushing that projection back onto the individual that's doing it. Um, I usually use it for just stopping whatever I'm feeling because a lot of situations a person doesn't even know that they're doing it. It's and I'm not saying that they're innocent because of that, but I'm very careful with how to use it because I know that this can be a very strong rune that can affect somebody. And sometimes if that person is not resilient enough, or that's not the word, um not able to withstand that type of energy coming at them, it can be very, very um like break someone down type thing. So I'm very, very careful because it can be hostile.
Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? Because sometimes the force that a projection can come at needs to be met with equal and sort of opposite, but at the same time, not in a way that's going to harm. It's more like to just say no, like you're saying, like a strong shield to go,
Mhm.
you're not going to push this, but then it'll reverberate. Maybe it's got to be the reflective capacity to be able to process
Mm.
when we use it. That I don't know. Do you use it in work though, or is it more one on one when you know that it's sort of really specific situation?
I use both. So I have actually used it at work, doing windows and stuff like that. I have brought in the energy, especially if we're in a specific area in the city that's really harsh and really bad. I've brought it in as a form of protection for myself and for,
Mhm.
Billy, just to be able to get us through the day without any issues and stuff like that. Individually, I've called it in at times where I'm really, really feeling some sort of connection coming in from the outside that's unwanted, or that like I'm feeling really messed up and I'm not sure where it's coming from or what's going on. Then I'll invoke this rune just to kind of set up a space around me where anything coming in is just going to bounce off and deflect,
Yeah.
and like you say, a way of reflection. So you made me think of using it alongside of soul, the Suilo rune, that to create that, like a sun shield almost, so that anything
Shine light
coming
on
in.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when um the Anglo-Saxons also, what happened with this rune is, like, you'll notice a lot if you do research on it, uh thorn comes up a lot, with the meaning of it. And so the Anglo-Saxons, what happened is that they completely rejected and dropped the original meanings of, like we spoke about, of Thor, and the active defense and all of that stuff. And they just wanted to retain that, the difficult nature or character of the rune. So they really focused on the thorn aspect. But if we look at the Eddas, there's tons of stuff in there actually about the thorn. Like there's the sleep thorn that Odin um poked one of the Valkyries for disobeying him and stuff like that. And you know, if we take the story literally, then we look at it as like, geez, Odin's not that's terrible. But if we look at the deeper aspects of the story, what I'm seeing is that thorn can be used as a way to protect and to help avoid any harm coming at you, because through that story the Valkyrie disobeyed Odin, and so the battle that was supposed to happen didn't occur, and it messed up a whole, like the events just completely shifted and changed,
Online. Yeah.
right? And so I feel that the sleep thorn that he placed on her put her to sleep, and it wasn't necessarily as a punishment, the way that I think that the monks or whatever, or that rewrote the stories, really wanted us to think it as a punishment. I think it as a way of shifting something or changing something, using it
Mhm.
to alter the events so that we can get back into alignment, back on path. Let's see. We'll go to the rune poem. So Norwegian rune poem for thirst. The thirst causes the illness of women. Few become glad from evil. And so they're focusing on, I don't know, if you read it, it doesn't sound very good. But if we go into how, like, this is translated in reference to women, but today many scholars take that second line, few become glad from evil, as a way to expand the possible effects of this rune to all genders, not just to women. And I feel that if we look at how they translate thirst to giants, so back in those times, giants, the Jotun, were feared, not only because they were very large, very powerful beings that were able to shapeshift and do magic, ritual magic, and they were they were seen as the uncontrollable aspects of nature,
Mm.
chaos and destruction. And so, but it was also written in the Eddas that some of the gods had interracial marriages with the giants, right? So some gods married the giants, and so there were actual stories, sagas of warriors who uh, would marry some of the Jotun women, but it was seen as almost like a curse if a woman were to marry a Jotun man. And so some of that belief comes from if a Jotun wife were to have the child of a human man, it's not going to be a big deal. But if a human woman, were to have the child of a Jotun man, that could be very destructive to her body, and she may not even survive.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Um, it'd be just because of the size difference and all of that. So there was these little feelings around that, about the childbirth being very, very dangerous, and could be coming from that. And it was also the way that the Jotuns would use their ritual magic, would in some of the stories they would use it to attack the families of the warriors. And so their focus would be on the women, the mothers, because if the mothers weren't there, then the children most likely will not survive without their father there. And I feel like it kind of speaks of the suffering aspects in order to warn people of the harshness that it carries, right? It's like really trying to get the point across, to be very careful with this rune. It's not a gentle energy. It can be used for good, but it could also completely destroy something.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I was reading it, I was kind of like, it could be turned back onto like a reverse kind of curse, that the women could be using it, because I was thinking about the age of the Christianity seeing women as powerful. So I saw it as more, this causes the illness of women, like they misuse it.
Mm-hmm.
Like from the sort of, that's the way I read it. But the more you've unpacked it, the more I'm like, no, it was also that warning of it was being used to not just separate, but kind of the interracial stuff as well,
Mm-hmm.
divide up families, and of course target the women.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes
That,
sense.
and during that time, that was a huge thing that was happening, is the targeting of women and their like herbalists and the women who were, sovereign and very independent, that sort of thing. So trying to create fear within it. But like, it also, I'll just go back to the shape of it. And you're talking about of it coming back. So if we look at the shape of the rune, we have, say, the individual through this line here, and then we have the magic being sent out and the magic coming back. Right.
Yeah,
So it's
like
that
memory.
whatever we put out comes back to us.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you were misusing it, it's going to cause an illness in you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a double meaning, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And if I believe both the Icelandic and the Norwegian rune poems speak of the same type of pain, suffering that it could cause. Um, and if we look at the, what's it called? Skirnismel, it can offer us a glimpse of the power of this rune, because this is an interesting story, because whenever it's told, it always gives this feeling of how Freyr won the hand of Gerd in marriage. And the story, how it's told, kind of makes you feel like it's a love story of how Freyr just fell completely in love with Gerd and had to have her, and eventually Gerd agreed to the marriage. But if you actually go into the story, and because there's some texts that leave it out, like some of the translations leave out certain things. If you can find the full translation of this story, it's not a love story. It's basically a forcing of the Jotun Gerd into marriage with Freyr. Because
Wow.
what happens is that Freyr sends his servant, or his helper or whatever, to go speak to Gerd on his behalf. And they don't make it clear if Freyr gave him the instructions to do it in this way, or if Skirnir did it on his own. We don't know. But what happens is that Gerd disagrees to the marriage. She's like, no, I'm not marrying him. I don't care if he's a god. I'm not marrying him. And so what Skirnir does is he goes about forcing her hand in marriage to Freyr by applying rune magic using this rune.
Okay.
And he also uses Galdralag as a curse. And in the curse, he speaks of all the torments that she will experience if she does not agree to marry Freyr. And so, with the curse already spoken, and with him sealing it by invoking this rune 3 times, she eventually just agrees to marry him, so to avoid it.
Yeah.
And in the full translation, they speak the full curse, and then at the end they speak the words that was spoken with the sealing of this rune of these runes. And I had thought of including it in here, and I was like, no, I don't even want to bring that. I don't want to bring that energy in. I don't even want to speak it, because of the power of it, and what, like, I don't know exactly what could happen or occur from it.
Mm.
So it just shows how powerful that story speaks of, how powerful this rune can be, how it can completely change someone's life. And this story speaks of the use of it in a way that's without permission for someone, and force, in the brute force of something.
Yeah. It's like a rape, like total disrespect of just insisting.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. So, and I believe, though, that in the story, Gerd agrees to the marriage, but she does stipulations of that it has to be where Freyr has to wait 9 days and 9 nights before he can even see her. And they don't really make clear if it's her way of working her own spell in a way to, she has this curse now and doesn't necessarily know how to break it. But even in a curse, we can create our own magic to help us through the curse, right? So it doesn't really necessarily say any of that, but my thoughts around, like, the 9 days and then the 9 nights, that's a very sacred time frame, a sacred number. And in my own magic, sometimes I'll do a spell 3 days in a row, or if it's something to do with illnesses and stuff like that, I'll do the 9 days, 9 night type of time frame.
mhm.
So it makes me wonder if there was something within her that was trying to work some magic on her own to try to help her in that, you know.
Mm. Like give me a bit of space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And then there's also one more. Well, there's many, but I only chose 2 that were kind of examples of the power of the use of rune magic. And I think I've spoken about this one before in the Elder Futhark, how there was a young woman that was experiencing a great illness, and it was caused by rune magic. And basically it was where she was very ill and they brought in someone who was experienced in healing, and he started asking questions, and then he found out from the locals that there was a person that came in and etched runes on a bone. It was either a bone or a piece of wood. They're not really clear in that translation, but etched runes on it and placed it in her bed. And it started to make her super sick. And these runes were supposed to help her get better, but it actually made her illness worse. And so, and in those runes was this rune, thirst, was amongst them. And so this person that they brought in to help, he was like, give me that. And he was like, these, this is where we get the learn how to carve them, learn how to read them, learn how to work them, learn how to paint them, and all those things, because the dangers of using the runes within rune magic for somebody or even for ourselves can be detrimental if we don't understand how to work with them. But how he released it was he took the bone or the wood and he scraped the runes into the fire, and then he also burned the bone or the wood, and it released the illness from her and released the rune magic. So it not only shows us the danger of it, but it shows us how we can, release it.
Be deactivated or
Yeah,
reverse it. Yeah.
yeah. So it's interesting. I just find it interesting. So we'll move on to what originally was Ansu's in the Younger Futhark. And this one it's Uz or Az. The trans how the evolution of this rune, and I gave this shape of the rune because you will find it like this, but you will also find it without these two lines. So instead of Ansu's being where the line comes here and here, it's now shifted down into the center. So sometimes you'll see it without this side of the rune.
Oh, okay.
You'll
Yeah.
just see this one. So they don't really include this as a change in form because it kind of still holds the shape of it, of the original Ansu's. It's just a little bit different. And Oz or Ooze, it might be Ooze. Ooze and Oz are the two different, they're kind of like Icelandic and Norwegian. So Ansu's, the Proto-Indo-European way of speaking it was Ansu without the Z, and it basically meant spirit. And then its Proto-Germanic descendant Ansus with the Z came into play, and that meant God. So that instead of spirit, it now meant God or a God. And then it was given to the fourth Elder Futhark rune, given that name. Ansu's in Old Norse became Oz. And it still carried the meaning of God or a God.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end of the Viking Age, this room shifted to Oz, the OS. And then its name started to mean river mouth. And it now represented the letter O instead of the kind of the nasally A sound. So it shifted sounds because of the language, evolution of the language part. So in Iceland, Oz became associated specifically with the god Odin. And this is what I was talking about, is how with the last rune, they really tried hard to separate Thor from that rune. But this rune really held on to the meaning of Odin. and it actually became stronger. I sometimes think that it might be kind of like the rebellion against them, like, you took away Thor, but you're not taking this type of energy. And so if we go into deeper thinking about Odin, Odin was, of all the Norse gods, Odin is the most closely connected to the original Proto-Indo-European meaning of spirit. And in the Eddas it states that Odin was the one who gave Ond to the very first humans, Ask and Embla. And Ond in Old Norse literally means breath, but it can also be translated as spirit. So in the creation story, we have Ask and Embla as driftwood
Yeah.
alongside some water, right? And it was Odin, Vili, and Ve, him and his two brothers that brought us to life.
So definitely a creator kind of breathing life into something.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
A very um it carries like that wisdom and knowledge from the beginning of something, right?
Mm.
Whatever came in, that energy that came in for something to be created, that the beginning wisdom that was, it's like for me, that beginning part is a very sacred. Whatever we learn afterward, of course, is wisdom and knowledge that we can carry forward with us and keep learning from it. But that beginning piece that made something come into existence is that, like, ancient sacred wisdom, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this rune taps into that very old wisdom, and it has a meaning of like ancient ancestor. So if we look in the rune texts, there's um olding or elding gout. Elding gout is a kenning for ancient ancestor, and it was connected to this rune. And Odin was also spoken of as, the elding gout, ancient ancestor. In some of the Norse traditions, it's believed that humans are descendants from Odin and his brothers because they were the ones who breathed life into, or breathed us into existence, basically.
Mm.
And it's also found in the Eddas that the Volsungs and the Anglo-Saxon royal lineage are descendants of Odin. So they have like a genealogy timeline. If you read the Volsung saga, it begins with like the Odin and then coming down the timeline with them.
Mhm.
So wisdom, knowledge. Let's see, Rivermouth will go into a little bit more into when we move into this next slide here for the rune poem. So Rivermouth is the way of most journeys, but a scabbard of swords. And when I was reading and researching this one, trying to understand what this means, some of the scholars were really focusing on that it's more like a metaphor for the point of departure for a shamanic journey. So the beginning of something to help put us in that state. And I think of that as how, like, the river mouth, sometimes the chanting and the singing, it's like we open ourselves up so that whatever needs to flow through can just come out freely. And in those chants, in those psalms, we are able to come into a state where we could travel
Mhm.
on different levels. But there is some controversy because some of the scholars think that the original Norwegian rune poem text for this rune has been completely lost. What they have was kind of damaged and not in a very good shape. Like some of it was ripped and faded and stuff like that. Water damage on it, they say. And so they say that it's really hard to interpret because some of the words they couldn't see, and also the way this one was written doesn't follow the alliteration of other rune poems. So it just has
Mhm.
a different way of writing, but I feel like that it was meant to be that way because this rune is completely different than the energy is different. It's it's like it's like connecting deeply to the spirit, deeply to that ancient knowledge. And so for me, why wouldn't it be completely different than anything else? Right. And the second line, but a scabbard of swords. I feel like maybe, I don't know if this would be correct or not, but I feel like it could be a reference to like calm the violence that can occur between warriors and battles by using the wisdom of words and speech, like talking it out instead of running into battle with our swords, like leaving the physical sword battles as like the last resort. But like I feel like it's a way of showing how words and speech could calm the violence by providing wisdom or insight or in guidance instead of brute violence. That makes sense. If it can
Yeah.
begin that way instead of going directly into violence.
Yeah. Well, it's just a holding, like the river mouth to me is, it's potential. It's the holding of before you journey, like you're saying.
Mhm.
But that point where you put the sword in is also the holding place of, there's potential that could get out of hand
Yeah.
the minute that you take the sword out of the scabbard. But it is that meeting point, like you're saying, maybe a point of just hold and listen for a minute.
Mhm.
Let's just begin in the good way
Mhm.
rather than straight into fighting again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that pausing point before the journey
Yeah.
where you're holding.
Where you kind of maybe reflect on what is available or what is there before making the decision to move forward, to
Mm,
help you figure out a way to move forward in a such a way that's going to be good.
mm,
Because I mean, I think back in those times it was probably needed, the battles were needed for some way of a form of evolution in a way. But I think as they progressed, as they evolved, they started to really realize the power that words carry and what
yep,
that could offer, right? And so if if communication and talking with someone could stop a battle or stop violence in any way, what power does that carry? Like that's a massive amount of
yeah.
power to have.
No,
Mhm.
it feels like a yeah, it's like that point of creation, like you're holding potential to either save lives, um, create life, do something differently, like breathe inspiration into something. Like it feels like yeah, much different to the previous room,
Yeah. Yeah.
but in a powerful way. That potential, the creative power for me, that ancient wisdom, all of it
Mhm.
The swords, yeah, you're not using it at that point. You're just sitting there with the potential.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So if you were to use this rune, if you in your daily life right now, if you were to use this rune on a daily basis, can you describe how you would use it?
Well, I would see it more as a um it's like a to where can I go to be of most use, like, or of service. So being guided by that journey, but also almost like that prayer to be as peacefully as possible when we have interactions.
Mm.
So I would be seeing it as more as a holding rune to make sure that the ancestral wisdom was flowing, that you're going to be getting the deepest um not just like healing for both ways, for yourself, for past things, as well as whoever you encounter.
Mhm.
So, like I just thought of Jer saying, sometimes he'll wake up and to say, where can I be of most use today?
Mhm.
Sort of be guided by that. This is such a powerful creator rune for me.
Mhm.
It's like one of the deepest ways of praying, in a way, to use this to say all the ancient ancestors and all the potential of going on a journey today, being guided where I need to be, but in the most peaceful way. So I'm holding that power in a respectful way,
Mhm.
not just and not in a way that's above anyone else, like you're just wanting to serve.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
know whether that made any sense. That's what came when you're saying a daily use, because it feels like the daily invocation in a way.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
So when you just said, just going back to the image, it's kind of like fair sometimes, but the other way down round. So
Yeah,
those
so
sticks on the other side are gone sometimes.
yeah, so um like the regular rune on Sue's. Wonder if I have see. The this will give a clear um so is it backwards? I don't know if it's backwards.
No, that's fine.
So here's
So
on
that's
Sue's.
yeah,
And then if you it's just basically the lines have moved down to the center and
okay.
sometimes there's an extension. And I like if we look at the shape of it, so if another thing that just popped in is that because you can take interpretations from the shapes of them too, like we showed on the last one how the we're the
Hmm.
individual and then it comes back to us. With this one we have our individuality or our person here in the center, and these brackets coming off or branches coming off in the center is basically our divine energy coming out and our purpose coming out. And then if we have the extension going up, it's like connecting up into spirit
Hmm.
from behind or from forward. Like we could even be facing the other way where we're taking spirit in and it's coming through us and out.
Yeah. No, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.